What if Qui Gon survived? This is Qui Gon Jinn. He's a Jedi that many Star Wars fans know and love, adored by the masses for his long hair, calm demeanor, and unorthodox views on the Force. It also probably helps that he's played by Liam Neeson. Unfortunately, to those who immediately fell in love with the character, George Lucas made the decision to kill Qui-Gon off in The Phantom Menace during the Duel of the Fates, allowing for Obi-Wan to step up and take responsibility for Anakin's training. But what if Qui-Gon didn't die? That's a topic that we'll be exploring in today's video. Our story takes us all across the galaxy, and on some unexpected turns. So let's just hop right into the scenario of what if Qui-Gon Jinn survived. Our story begins during the Duel of the Fates on Naboo. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are both able to make it through the final shield that leads deeper into the plasma mines at the same time, so they confront Maul together for the final showdown. Maul, who had stood his ground for the entire fight, still puts up a good show. However, using the dark side in combat is taxing on him, especially as somebody who is still a fairly immature Force user. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan manage to disarm Maul by slicing his saber staff in half. They then both force push Maul into the wall at the same time, throwing him back and knocking him unconscious. The two Jedi pick him up and take him back to the Theed Palace after Padme and her little insurrection take back control of the city from Viceroy Gunray. This is a monumental change in the Star Wars timeline, so how does it play out and influence the story? Let's continue to explore that concept. When the two Jedi come back to Coruscant, they hand Maul over to the Republic officials to be put on trial alongside the Trade Federation ones for having an emergency meeting with the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon demands that he be allowed to train Anakin and pushes hard for the Council to make an exception for the older boy. After hours of argument and deliberation, the Jedi Council finally obliges Qui-Gon's request, provided that he continue to be able to train Obi-Wan until his trials. Maul is tried and thrown in prison, sentenced to a life in jail for his crimes against the world of Naboo. Because Maul lives, Sidious fears that he will eventually give in to Republic pressure and tell them about his plan for the galaxy and for the revenge of the Sith. So, Sidious hires the killer Aurra Sing to assassinate Maul. Maul has a window so that he doesn't go completely insane in his cell, and Sing positions herself near that window with a solid vantage point. She prepares to fire her rifle, and Maul begins to sense a strange presence in the Force nearby. He goes into a deep state of meditation and finds her with the Force, choking her with all of his might because he can tell that she has malicious intent through her Force energy. Maul sees an image of Sing begging for mercy to some obscure deity, not knowing what is attacking her. Just before she's about to pass out, Maul lets her go, leaving her with a message to remember: never mess with a Sith Lord. Sing, however, believing that the money would be worth the trouble, ends up resuming her task. As Maul returns to his meditation, Sing fires. The window shatters and Maul opens his eyes. Another bolt fires in rapid succession, but Maul is able to reach out with the Force and hold it in place, just like Kylo Ren does in The Force Awakens. Maul fires the bolt back at Sing, and it hits her directly in the forehead, killing her. Maul jumps out of the window and runs, slowly descending into the depths of Coruscant. Despite Maul's survival, Sidious still needs a new apprentice to replace him. So, after Dooku leaves the Jedi Order, he approaches him and recruits him to his cause. Dooku takes up the mantle of Darth Tyrannus and begins to study in the ways of the dark side. In contrast, Qui-Gon trains Anakin in a rigorous fashion. Rather than scoff at Anakin's unorthodox methods and behaviors, Qui-Gon embraces them. He guides Anakin towards the light, cautioning him against indulging in darker emotions. However, Qui-Gon also knows that the dark side can be used for good. Even Mace Windu uses Vapod, a lightsaber form that channels an opponent's dark side energy and uses it against them. Anakin learns to control his emotions and develops a deep, brotherly bond with Obi-Wan. After Obi-Wan passes his Padawan trials, he trains with Anakin during spare time, often sparring and acting as a mentor figure in the ways of the Jedi. Obi-Wan introduces Anakin to many of his friends, giving the blossoming Jedi an expansive social circle, who help refine him into a better Jedi. Anakin hones his power, learning how to balance the light and the dark within him, and becomes extremely powerful very quickly. Maul continues to roam the streets of Coruscant, anxious that his old master will find him. He knows that he has to leave the planet because Sidious could sense his presence. Maul continues to hold a grudge against Obi-Wan and Qui Gon for defeating him, believing that he needs vengeance. So, Maul steals a small ship from the underbelly of the Coruscant slums and is able to slip past the planet's air traffic controllers unnoticed. He makes the trip to Dathomir to find Mother Talzin, hoping that he can reconnect with his heritage and find support from his brothers and sisters in the Night Sister clan. The Night Sisters welcome Maul back with open arms and are infuriated with the Jedi for their actions against him. Mother Talzin is also suspicious of the hunter that came to kill him, believing heavily this person was sent by Sidious. He had betrayed the Night Sisters in the past and could have possibly done it again. While he was a dark side user, as a Sith, Sidious did not have the same sense of camaraderie that the Sisters did with his fellow Sith Lords. Instead, he was competitive and ruthless. Talzin tells Maul that she will help train him in the ways of dark side magic so that he can confront those who had wronged him. Meanwhile, while Anakin is training, he still receives visions of his mother's suffering through the Force. He's more comfortable talking to Qui Gon about his feelings because Qui Gon is an understanding Jedi who's down to bend the rules every once in a while. Anakin brings up his concerns, and because Qui-Gon is more flexible than the other Jedi, he acknowledges that the Force is calling Anakin to come to her aid. So, Qui-Gon takes Anakin in order to check out the situation, much earlier than Anakin does in Attack of the Clones. Anakin finds Watto, who directs him to Klieg Largs, just like in the movie. Klieg informs the Jedi of the situation, and they venture out into the desert to find Shmi. Upon arrival at the Tusken camp, Anakin quickly goes into the tent and retrieves his mother while Qui-Gon stands watch. As the Tuskens begin to aggress, noticing strange people in their camp, Qui-Gon uses the Force to hold them off and clears a path for Anakin and Shmi. Shmi is in much better condition than she was in Attack of the Clones. The three of them are able to get back on their speeders quickly and all speed away. All the men, women, and children of the camp survive. There's no massacre of the Tuskens. Anakin and his mother have a touching reunion, hugging and crying about how proud each of them are in the progress that they've both made over the years. Sadly, Anakin and Qui-Gon have to head back to Coruscant almost immediately after the rescue for fear that the Jedi Council will find out about their actions. Qui-Gon and Anakin agree to keep their adventure hush-hush, but both are pleased that they followed the will of the Force and did something good. A couple of years later, there's an attempted assassination of Senator Amidala on the landing platform of Coruscant, just like in the opening scene of Attack of the Clones. The Jedi insist on providing her with increased protection, so they send their A-team to guard her. Anakin, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan. They go to meet her, just like in Attack of the Clones, and Anakin still uses his max-level Jedi Riz to try and woo her. Obi-Wan rolls his eyes, and Qui-Gon chuckles in the background. That night, Zam Weasel still attempts to kill Padme with the little worms, but is chased down by the Jedi. When Obi-Wan attempts to jump out and grab onto the droid delivering the worms, Qui-Gon stops him and chastises him for just telling Anakin not to act rashly, then proceeding to do something incredibly rash. The trio calls the Coruscant police and informs them of what's going on. Zam is quickly apprehended by the police, but is still shot quickly by Jango, who's monitoring her progress. The police inform the Jedi of what has transpired for the sake of their investigation and their protection of the Senator, and also hand over the dart to Obi-Wan, who still goes to Dex's diner and finds out more about its origins. The investigation continues to lead them to Kamino, but the Jedi Council has the foresight that Anakin was not mature enough to protect Padme and needs more training with Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon tells them about the situation where Anakin tried to hit on her in an incredibly poor fashion, and they agree, no, not such a great idea to send a teenage boy on a mission with this senator. So, Obi-Wan, a more experienced Jedi Knight, goes to Naboo in order to protect the targeted senator instead. Anakin and Qui-Gon are tasked with the exploration of what's taking place on Kamino. Obi-Wan, while feeling somewhat tempted to pursue something with Padme because of the romantic setting of their remote location, stays strong in his commitment to the Jedi Order and abstains from following anything. He also doesn't believe that Satine would be too pleased if he pursued Padme at all. While his personality is naturally flirtatious, nothing romantic ever really comes to blossom between Obi-Wan and Padme. Hey folks, if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we update this channel weekly with new What If content. Now, back to the story. When Qui-Gon and Anakin arrive on Kamino, the Kaminoans show them the clone army. They're blown away and are slightly confused by the entire situation. Qui-Gon is incredibly suspicious, especially when they meet Jango and notice his Mandalorian armor. The police had told Qui-Gon that the killer had been seen in Mandalorian armor, but that it was dark and difficult to identify any more specifics. It was odd now that Mandalorian shows up on this obscure planet and was connected to a secret army that had been dedicated to the Republic, while also being seen killing a senator in the past, or at least someone that was Mandalorian was connected to that attempt on Padme's life. A little bit odd that these two connect. Anakin and Qui-Gon report this to the Jedi Council, and the Council orders that this Mandalorian be apprehended. As Jango is preparing the Slave One to leave Kamino with Boba, the two Jedi catch up to him. A short battle ensues, and Jango orders that Boba leave and get to safety. Boba obliges, flying the ship away. While Jango is able to get away from Obi-Wan in the films, the two Jedi are a little bit more difficult for him to flee from, especially with a water world with nowhere to hide. Jango is subdued and captured after putting up a solid fight. After the Jedi capture Jango, they bring him before the Council to provide them with some answers. At first, Jango refuses to oblige. However, after promising that they will give the bounty hunter a place to settle down in the Republic with his son, and offering him a few credits, Jango agrees to answer their questions. He informs them about the droid army and the Separatist Council preparing for war. This shocks the Jedi, and they bring Jango to testify before the Senate. He tells them everything that he knows, shocking many of the senators as well. He also testifies about the clone army made from his DNA. Palpatine puts it to a vote whether or not to use this clone army in order to apprehend these rogue separatist leaders that are going against their wishes. The Senate votes almost unanimously in a yes, notably still seeing the absence of Padme Amidala from the floor due to her prolonged absence from threat of death from political adversaries. The clones are sent to Geonosis, taking the Separatist leaders off guard, and the war for the galaxy ensues. Boba and Jango end up settling down on Coruscant, and Jango still takes some bounty hunting gigs, but he has more than enough to be able to spend time with his son, and Boba is raised in a proper Mandalorian fashion with his father, and together they end up having an excellent childhood with many adventures. However, in the greater galactic scale, in the words of Yoda, begun, the Clone Wars have. On Dathomir, Maul continues to train in the ways of the dark side, engaging with magic and his previous training under Sidious. He waits patiently for his time for revenge while simultaneously refining his skills as a Force user. One day, another sister returns home. Her name is Asajj Ventress, and she too had been betrayed by the Sith. She left her old master, Count Dooku, and was returning to her roots, especially after Count Dooku had left her for dead. Maul emphasized that he empathized with her and took her under his wing, intending to show her everything that he had learned over the years. They approach Mother Talzin and inform her of the situation. She is infuriated and hatches a plan to take revenge on Dooku and his treachery against the Night Sister clan. Just like in the Clone Wars, Talzin offers Savage to Dooku as a replacement for Ventress. He is turned into an absolute monster, especially after being refined by the Night Sister magic and Maul's tutelage. The two brothers develop a close bond, and Maul is sad to see Savage leave. However, he knows that this is all part of the plan of retribution against the Sith. Maul remains patient. Savage loyally serves Dooku, pretending to do whatever Dooku desires for many months. Eventually, Talzin sends Maul and Ventress to be purposely captured by Dooku and join Savage in usurping him. Sure enough, they're captured by Separatist forces in the Outer Rim. The two put up a good fight, enough to put on a show, before being subdued by droid forces. Grievous, being present on the ship that finds the two Dathomirians, instantly recognizes Ventress and scoffs at her, remarking how far she must have fallen to be in cahoots with some nobody Dathomirian man. Maul remains silent, but feels hate course through his veins. This is what he'd been replaced with? Some cybernetic monstrosity? He would channel this when it came time to face Dooku, the real man who was pulling the strings, or at least appeared to be pulling the strings to the rest of the galaxy. Knowing that Dooku would want to see his former apprentice again, only to gloat and to perhaps kill her himself, Grievous contacts Dooku and lets him know what is going on. Dooku orders that they be brought to his castle on Sereno, where he would deal with both of them personally. Grievous orders that the ship he's on be rerouted to Sereno in order to meet Dooku, and the journey ensues. When they arrive, Dooku is on a holocall with Sidious. Dooku tells his master what has occurred, and Sidious is intrigued. He wants to know what will happen next. Savage stands behind Dooku, stoic as ever. Savage knows what he's going to have to do and knows that he has the strength to do it. Grievous brings the prisoners into Dooku's personal office, and Dooku is satisfied to see his apprentice in chains. He gloats for a bit before commanding that Savage kill these traitors. Savage ignites his saber staff, advancing forward. However, rather than going towards Ventress and Maul, Savage stands behind Dooku. The Count senses what is going on, but it is already too late. He whirls around to face Savage and tries to bring his lightsaber into his hand, but before he's able to do so, he's stabbed through the chest. Grievous ignites his sabers, prepared to duel this awful, monstrous Dathomirian. However, the room is silenced by Sidious's evil laugh. Maul recognizes that laugh. After years of training, he is frozen in fear by it. That was the chilling voice of Darth Sidious, his old master. Maul's eyes go wide and he tries to run away, but Grievous stops him. Maul thinks he's as good as dead in the eyes of his old master. But then something unexpected happens. Sidious is pleased to see his old apprentice. He recognizes that Maul has advanced in the Force and would make an excellent asset during the Clone Wars, especially after the death of Dooku. He says that he will offer Maul a position at his right-hand side if he embraces his hatred and eliminates his competition that stood in the room with him right now. Ventress tries to sway Maul, reminding him that Sidious had left him for dead once before and that the Night Sisters had taken him in. However, Maul is enamored by the prospect of power. Sidious also promises that he will give him the necessary tools to hunt down and defeat the Jedi that defeated him on Naboo. This pushes Maul over the edge. He shoves Savage against the wall, knocking him unconscious. Maul then grabs Savage's saber and duels with Ventress, embroiled in pure hatred and desire to survive. Eventually, he overwhelms her and kills her. He then walks over to Savage, who's still unconscious in the corner, and stabs him through the chest, just as Savage had done to Dooku. Grievous bows before Maul, recognizing his power. Sidious is pleased, and Maul takes the place as Sidious's right-hand man once again. Maul follows the will of his master, but never knows Sidious's full plan. He often has nightmares about his horrible mutilation of Savage and Ventress, and fears the wrath of his old mentor, Mother Talzin. Fast forward a couple years in the Clone Wars. Anakin has passed his Padawan trials and is now a knight, but continues to complete many missions with his old master. Anakin and Qui Gon are assigned to the Outer Rim sieges and are now leading the 501st in an assault on Ringo Vinda. With the help of the Jedi sisters Tiplar and Tipli, along with the sisters' clone units, they push back droid forces further away from the civilian docking bay that orbits the planet. Similar to what happens in the Clone Wars, Tup still has a malfunctioning inhibitor chip and turns on the Jedi sisters before being neutralized and sent to Kamino for further observation. When Tup arrives on Kamino, him and Fives are being tested by the Kaminoans. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, the Kaminoans are conducting many tests in secret and are being incredibly ambiguous about their true intent behind the treatment of Tup. They don't want the Jedi to find out about Order 66 before the time comes. Soon, Fives begins to suspect that something is amiss, so he begins his own investigation, alongside the droid AZ34521189. Forget it. I'm just going to call him AZ, and yes, I'm going to call him AZ because I'm Canadian. They find the inhibitor chip and reveal it to the Jedi, but the Kaminoans deny that it's for anything nefarious. Instead, they say that it is simply meant to prompt the clones to better comply with orders from their Jedi generals. The Kaminoans plan to erase the memories of AZ and Fives, but Fives is able to escape with the help of the droid. Just like in the Clone Wars, eventually Fives is brought before the Chancellor with the help of Shaak Ti, who Fives approaches after escaping from the Kaminoans. She doesn't know about the Chancellor's involvement with this plan, and brings him before the Chancellor. Fives tells Palpatine everything that he knows, and then Palpatine cackles as he reveals his plan to Fives. Fives is horrified and sprints out of the room, trying to convince people that Palpatine is actually Darth Sidious and is going to kill all of the Jedi. Palpatine says that Fives is deranged and that he just tried to assassinate him. Fives continues to run and is being hunted across Coruscant. This is when Fives contacts Captain Rex on a secure channel and tells him the situation and to meet him in an obscure place in the bowels of Coruscant. He sounds flustered and Anakin is skeptical about the situation. Qui-Gon, however, senses that something is amiss. He recommends going to meet Fives and hear him out. So, the three of them end up meeting Fives in a very out-of-the-way alley in the underbelly of Coruscant. Sadly, shortly after Fives starts recounting his tale to Rex and the Jedi, Commander Fox and his gang of clones end up finding him. They had been tracking him with his inhibitor chip, which he hadn't yet had time to remove from his head. Fives is then shot at by Fox, and Qui-Gon orders him to stop. However, Fox resists Qui-Gon's command, saying that the Chancellor's wishes override the Republic military officials. Fives runs away, continuing to scream about the insidious... You see what I did there? Funny? Yeah? No? Alright, bad pun, I'll move on. Plot against the Republic. But he ends up being shot in the back, falling flat on his face. Rex comes over and comforts his friend in his final moments, watching sorrowfully as the life leaves Fives' eyes. Qui-Gon brings the concerns of Fives to the Jedi Council, and they end up commissioning their own investigation into the matter. This is spearheaded by Anakin and Qui-Gon due to their experience in this murky arena of clones and inhibitor chips. Qui-Gon also wants to take Obi-Wan along in order to have another set of eyes. Qui-Gon advises against telling the Chancellor about this, but the Council doesn't have the same reservations about Palpatine as he does. So they inform Palpatine of this situation and the investigation into clone behavior. Of course, Palpatine applauds this initiative publicly. Behind closed doors, however, Palpatine contacts Maul and sends him after the Jedi investigators, promising him that now was his time for revenge. As the Jedi continue through the streets of Coruscant looking for clues that Fives may have left during his time in hiding, he is so consumed by rage, and he is ready to pounce on his prey. Eventually, and now, the moment that you've all been waiting for, the rematch between Maul and the Jedi. Maul jumps out of the shadows and attacks the three Jedi. For a second time, a battle ensues between Qui-Gon, with his apprentices at his side, and Maul. Maul does not intend to lose again, and he battles ruthlessly. The four tangle with one another, their blades clashing with powerful strikes and flashes of immense energy. Despite the combined skill of the three Jedi, Maul's rage begins to tire them out. However, Anakin remembers the lessons from Qui-Gon about tapping into the dark side with good intentions. He also remembers about learning the pod from Master Windu, and begins to channel Maul's fury and use it against him. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan watch in awe as Anakin spins ruthlessly, countering Maul's ferocity, utilizing his own anger against him. Maul's attacks waver, and Anakin knocks his staff from his hand, just as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon had done on Naboo. Anakin reaches out with the Force and holds Maul, binding him in place with his own anger. Maul shouts with rage, but he's helpless to do anything. Little does he know that if he simply calmed down, Anakin's strategy would be null and void. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon end up binding Maul physically and interrogating him. Anakin goes off to a small place nearby in order to meditate, calming down and recentering himself in the light side after his use of the pod. Eventually, Maul not only doesn't give them any information, but he also ends up spitting on them, and the trio decides that it would be best to take him back to the Jedi Temple and tell the Council more about what's going on. However, on their way to the Upper City, they receive a call from the Chancellor's office telling them that Coruscant had been attacked and that Palpatine had been kidnapped. They hadn't noticed because they were so deep underground. Obi-Wan agrees to take Maul to the Council, while Qui-Gon and Anakin take to the skies, flying in their Jedi interceptors to Grievous's flagship, where the Chancellor was being held. Qui-Gon and Anakin find Palpatine in a similar fashion to the way that Anakin and Obi-Wan do during Revenge of the Sith. However, once they reach the Chancellor, things play out a little bit differently. Since Dooku is dead and Maul is captured, Grievous has no choice but to come out and confront the Jedi in combat. Anakin remarks about how short Grievous is, and Grievous comes straight for him with his 4 spinning helicopter arms. Anakin flips over top of him, preparing to slice him on the other side. Qui-Gon remains in place, moving backwards. Anakin slashes at Grievous, cutting the cybernetic body, but it does little damage. 2 of Grievous's sabers battle with Qui-Gon, while the other 2 do with Anakin. Grievous becomes tired of this and eventually kicks Qui-Gon away with his sharp feet, pushing him into the wall and knocking him unconscious. Now, the fight is only between Anakin and Grievous. Because Anakin cannot use the pod to defeat Grievous, as Grievous is not a dark side Force user, Anakin relies solely on his training with Qui-Gon. He finds his grounding in the living Force and lets it flow through him, guiding his movements and his strikes. Grievous is a little bit shocked by some of Anakin's more unconventional ways of fighting, and is eventually backed into a corner. Anakin slices off his hands and circles the cyborg, trying to figure out his next move. Palpatine attempts to goad Anakin on, telling him that Grievous could now end the war with his death, and that it would be the perfect thing to do for the Republic. Screw Anakin's Jedi code, screw Republic technicalities and trials. This being deserved death for his war crimes. Anakin contemplates this momentarily, weighing out the pros and cons of each course of action in his mind. But then, Anakin feels something amiss. He asks the Chancellor why he believes that killing Grievous would be a good idea. He knows that a real Republic loyalist would want to bring Grievous in for questioning and find out more about Separatist holdouts. But Anakin doesn't have time to pursue this line of questioning, and simply decides to free the Chancellor, hold the unconscious Qui-Gon up with the Force, and prompt General Grievous to comply with Anakin's lightsaber. Because Palpatine doesn't have Padme and Shmi to lead Anakin into giving into his emotions, he fails in convincing him to kill Grievous. They escape the ship in a Separatist shuttle and land in the Jedi Temple after Anakin contacts the Council, telling them about the situation. They're reunited with Obi-Wan and bring Palpatine back into the Senate building, all slightly suspicious about the Chancellor's intentions. The trio once again brings up their concerns to Council, who actually agree with them at this point, especially since Palpatine continued to hold on to his emergency powers after the capture of Grievous. Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, Agan Kohler, and Saskatoon go to remove the Chancellor from power, unsanctioned by the Senate. It ends in a similar fashion to Revenge of the Sith. Palpatine doesn't hold back at all against Mace Windu, and despite Mace's use of the pod, Palpatine is still powerful enough to overwhelm him. This attempted coup by the Jedi allows for Palpatine to justifiably execute Order 66, and things start to go downhill for the Jedi from there. Generals in the Outer Rim were ruthlessly slaughtered by their men. Even clones in the core world started to turn. The 501st, however, remained loyal to their Jedi commanders. After the event with Fives and Tup, Rex had recommended that they all remove their inhibitor chips just in case there really was something going on. Each of them complied, seeing what had happened to their brothers and not wanting a repeat. Because of this, the 501st does not comply with Order 66, and their fellow clones betray the Jedi. This branch remains loyal to their former commanders. They help to fortify the Jedi Temple before any of the clones stationed on Coruscant have a chance to make it there. It was time for the Jedi to make their final stand against Palpatine's evil. An epic battle ensues between the Jedi in the Temple and the incoming clone troopers. Many of the 501st valiantly sacrifice their lives to save their Jedi comrades. Anakin and Qui-Gon fend off the attackers and help lead the younglings to secure rooms throughout the temple. Yes, in this timeline, Anakin does help the younglings, not, off them. They stand side by side with their brothers in the 501st, deflecting plasma bolts from the rampaging clones. Obi-Wan also helps defend the temple, even attempting to reason with some of his clone attackers. However, tragically, they're far too far gone. The siege of the temple lasts many days, and in the process, Palpatine forms the Galactic Empire, promising the squashing of these insurgents soon. His attack fails though, as droves of Jedi refugees end up fleeing the temple on transports that the 501st had commandeered before the raid, or that were already stationed in the temple's hangar. Many of these ships are shot down by clone starfighters and gunships, but there are also plenty who end up escaping. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin are among those survivors. They also take Maul with them, who had been imprisoned in the temple by the 501st, and attempt to turn him to the light. He resists heavily, still furious with his Jedi captors. He attempts to escape, but is instantly stunned by clone soldiers. Yoda still goes to overthrow Palpatine, and their duel still ends in a stalemate. This time, however, Yoda does not need to go into hiding. Instead, he rendezvous with the surviving Jedi who flee to the remote sanctuary of Tython, and regroups with the Masters, figuring out how to proceed. The Emperor, at least for the moment, believes that he has won. He ends up creating the Inquisitores to hunt down and defeat the remaining Jedi. However, due to their shared hope and their togetherness, these Jedi survive and thrive, to the point where their sect is actually deemed to be an official terrorist organization by the Empire. As the years pass, the Jedi integrate into the Rebel Alliance. Their expertise helps the Rebels win many key battles, especially that of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, and Anakin, of course. Luke and Leia are not born because Anakin and Padme never fall in love. So Yoda, Bail Organa, Padme, and Mon Mothma end up spearheading the movement towards a unified resistance and rejuvenation of the Republic. In this scenario, Padme never dies because she never fell in love with Anakin and never suffered the extreme heartbreak that she felt during childbirth. Maul, while initially resistant to the light side, slowly ends up letting go of his hatred and embracing redemption. He still doesn't fully accept the tenets of the Jedi, but he commits to joining them in their quest to usurp his old master, because he recognizes, for the first time in his life, that Sidious never truly cared for him. Battles rage across the galaxy, and Alderaan is never blown up by the Death Star because Leia's never born, and Tarkin never has to goad her into giving up her friends in the rebellion. How does this continued survival of the Jedi Order impact galactic affairs going forward? Eventually, the Rebel Alliance gains enough support to mount an attack on Coruscant. The Jedi raid the Emperor's office with Maul, actually deciding to take him on together this time rather than in small groups. The number of them that confront Palpatine are even too much for the Sith Lord, and they capture him and put him on trial. The Senate is reformed, and the galaxy begins to return to a democratic state of affairs because Palpatine is now in the custody of New Republic officers. The Jedi decide to take a break from galactic politics as they reclaim their old temple, seeking to once again find their purpose in the Force, and also seeing how many of them had died because of their blind allegiance to a corrupt government. Qui Gon passes into the Force, and Anakin mourns with Obi-Wan. However, they still have a deep sense of peace knowing that he is with them. His spirit remains, and he still had time to learn how to become a Force ghost in this scenario. Oftentimes, when the pair meditates together, they see his spirit guiding them. Maul even begins to meditate with the Jedi, also wanting to thank Qui-Gon for his contributions to his personal journey. The galaxy is safe for the first time in years, and Maul begins to find some inner peace. However, in the shadows of the Outer Rim, the Night Sisters still lurk, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Now that Palpatine was gone, they could once again return their focus to Maul, who had betrayed them and killed one of their sisters. Mother Talzin was still angry, and when somebody wrongs her, Talzin never forgets.